Hey folks, and welcome to Typology, the show in which we explore the mystery of the human personality through the lens of the Enneagram. My name is Anthony Skinner, producer of the show. We are super happy to have you here with us today. We, of course, have more great guests for you. We have two today, Toni and Carey Nieuwhof. Listen, we're going to talk about all kinds of things today. Toni is a family law mediator, a former divorce attorney, and co-host of the Smart Family Podcast. Carey is a former lawyer and founding pastor of Connexus Church. He also hosts the Carey Nieuwhof Leadership Podcast. They're both authors, and this is a fascinating conversation. A part of the focus for this conversation is around Toni's expertise in her book, Before You Split, Find Out What You Really Want for the Future of Your Marriage. Carey is an 8-wing 7, and Toni is a 5-wing 4. We cover lots of ground in this interview, folks, so stay tuned. You're going to love it. That's it for me, Anthony Skinner, and now let me throw it to the host of Typology, Ian Cron.
Carey and Toni Nieuwhof, welcome to Typology.
Hey, thank you so much for having us. Just thrilled to be here with you, Ian.
Great to hang out, Ian. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, man, I love having friends on, especially ones that I don't get to see very often, and especially ones that have exciting things going on. Toni, you have a new book. It's titled Before You Split, Find What You Really Want for the Future of Your Marriage. It's out on Waterbook Penguin. And wow, first of all, congratulations on a new book. And I'm excited to jump in to talk about an 8-5 marriage.
This could be a really short podcast, Ian. I think we can probably tie it up in 2 minutes. Like, I don't think we need a whole episode. There's been very little drama.
That combo, I think, was part of the genesis of this book, Ian.
Oh, I know. And I am going to get to that. Okay. All right. So we're going to talk about the book because I think it's fascinating. And I also, though, want to talk about this unique relationship between an 8 and a 5. And so I'm going to start with you, Toni. How would you describe Carey through the lens of the Enneagram?
Well, describing Carey could take a while, but I'll try to boil it down.
Okay.
He's very direct. He loves the truth and is a pursuer of it. He's not going to stand for any stories or, if there is a potential weakness in your story, he is going after it. He's very loyal. It takes a while for someone to get in, but once they're in, he is, I would say, fiercely loyal. And what else can I say? He may come off as being aggressive in a problem-solving situation because he's going to drive after the solution. What have I missed?
I don't know. You're supposed to describe me through the lens of the Enneagram, so I think that's up to you. I mean, does drivenness? You would probably say I'm very driven.
And I think there would be an undercurrent of that in what I've said. But yes, drivenness. You definitely, once you're committed to a cause, you have the vision for it. You can you can talk about it easily, and you have a gift at rallying people around a cause.
Well, I would also say probably the command aspect, like dominant.
Oh yes, do not try to control Carey. So if you really want him to grasp an idea, you need to go around it and plant the seeds so that eventually it comes out as his idea.
All right, so Carey, how would you describe Toni through the lens of the Enneagram?
Yeah.
This 5.
I would say for me, it just made so much sense. I mean, when we read your book a few years ago when it came out, and I mean, you know the story, I bought it for all my friends because that's what I do, but it just, so many things dropped into place. So one would be the hiddenness a little bit, like really hard to get to know, but so worth knowing. You have that joke that, you were with your friend Bill, who you've known for 30 years or whatever his name is, and you find out 30 years later he has a brother, and you're like, what, you have a brother? Like literally, I learned something about Toni. I can't name it right off the top of my head, but we were on a long walk a couple of weeks ago, and I'm like, I did not know that about you. And we've known each other 32 years. So there's still layers. Speed has been a big thing. You are very high capacity. You're a pharmacist and a lawyer and a mediator and a podcaster and an author. Like, you've had multiple careers. You've been successful at everything that you do, but the pacing is really different. I'm kind of large and in charge, and I just go at it like a bull in a china shop, and you just sit there very quietly. Like, you'll sometimes work for 6 or 8 hours without getting up. And I'm like, I've been up 17 times, ADD, mow the lawn, climb the roof, whatever, trying to generate ideas. And you're just strong and steady. You handle conflict very differently than I do. You tend to withdraw or to stonewall, whereas I would be like, no, we're gonna flesh this out right now. And you're also very rational. So I kind of think of myself as rational, but you're way more rational. And at times that combination of distance and rationality can sometimes present itself as cold. I think I don't see it that way anymore, but for years, that's how I saw it in our relationship. It's like, well, you're just dispassionate and cold. And I'm like, but I care about this stuff. And so I would say that was some of the conflict and how I would see you. I mean, huge respect I have from the beginning, and just tremendous capacity, but it's really interesting to see how your capacity is sort of the slow start that really gets moving over time. And then I tend to, come in strong and then fade.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. Sometimes even visually, and this is why we always have people on. I never just do it on the phone line. I want to see people. And part of it is just seeing the two of you sitting side by side. Those of you who are not watching on YouTube and are only listening, you can see the different energies. Mm-hmm. You can see externally, like it's on the outside, the posture, the animation of affect on the face is different. Like right now, for example, Toni, you're leaning back, and Carey, you're leaning forward. So you see,
so true. Yes. Yeah.
So you see the aggressive, you're in the aggressive stance, which is 3, 7s, and 8s. Toni, you're in the withdrawing stance. You're with 4s, 5s, and 9s, like me. And you both really articulated beautifully some of the dynamics in the 8-5 combo. Let me just, oftentimes people will ask me the question. I've been married 32 years, and sometimes people will say to me, tell me about your marriage. And I'll respond the same way every time. I'll go, which one? Right? I'm of the belief that everybody has multiple marriages to the same person. At year 5, maybe, or 7, or whatever it is, you realize, okay, the old contract isn't working. We got to renegotiate the contract. At year 12 or year 15, you're like, okay, it's time for the third marriage because the script has changed. The life has changed. Kids have maybe moved on. Time to renegotiate. Time for our third marriage, fourth marriage, fifth marriage. I think that's healthy. Now, if have you had multiple marriages to each other?
That's such an interesting question. I would have to say I see it more in terms of 2 marriages. And I think it's because the long lead in of the messy middle of our marriage it felt so chaotic that it's almost like there's a before and after, or the painful version and the amazing version, and there was definitely a transition point in the middle, but it seems more like 2 versions with seasons. We definitely had to go through seasons where our roles changed. My leadership role at the hospital changed. I took on another role in a different hospital. The schedules were very different. We had to, renegotiate seasons, but it feels more like 2 versions for us. But I totally understand what you're saying. And I resonate with that idea that there could be multiple versions.
Toni, I want to ask you a question because your book is so fascinating and I think is so helpful. You talk about the messy middle, and I want to know what the messy middle was.
How many hours do you have?
All the time in the world.
Well, Carey and I, we got fairly quickly into our marriage. It was like 18 months from meeting each other to being married. And then it was another 18 months from our wedding day to having our first son. And we were at law school in between. So we did literally hit the ground running. And then Carey went to seminary. And a few years after that, we ended up leading some small churches north of Toronto. And I was a professional, trained as a pharmacist. So I was working as a pharmacist. Carey was leading the churches. We had 2 young boys, and we just ended up, I think, not being able to connect with each other from different perspectives. We couldn't get into a place of emotional safety with each other. We were I would be the first one to put up my hand and say I was emotionally unprepared for marriage. I did not know, well, I didn't connect with my own feelings, but had no idea that I wasn't. But I know that, I joke that I was raised by my friends, and that I basically learned life just by observing what other people would do and how other people would respond. And early in my career, I heard a doctor talk about, that your patients don't care what you know unless they know that you care. So learned that, I need to have this appearance of connecting with other people's emotions. And yet I had the internal climate of, I don't know what positive emotions are. Like I even started my faith that way. And I asked God that question, like, I'm following Christ. Where's the love? Where's the joy? Where's the peace? Like, I have no idea what those feelings feel like. And so we had this emotional disconnection, and then we just couldn't get through our differences. When we had a difference, Carey would really go hard after trying to resolve it. And it's not that I didn't want to resolve it, but I felt like I needed space, and I needed some time to process whatever the solution would be. And so we would really get into this pattern where I would say Carey was being too aggressive. I would give up. I would withdraw. I would zone out, go into my own world. That would make Carey more frustrated. So we just had this tension that was building and building, grievances that we couldn't get past, expectations that would clash, but we really couldn't communicate about them. And so it was literally just a messy, chaotic situation where I knew I was frustrated. I could connect with negative emotions. But it was so hard in that space I think for both of us, to get what we really wanted, which was that closeness that we at least experienced at the beginning, but just we couldn't seem to get there.
Carey, what do you want to add?
Yeah, I would say the messy middle was definitely messy. There wasn't a precipitating event. It wasn't like there was this massively bad day. We just kind of, I think what we're learning as we talk about this book, what a lot of couples experience is the slow drift into disconnection. And so it was skirmishes, and Rebecca Lyons called it the 10-year argument. I think that's very true. A lot of couples have just things like money was always a tension point for us, in part because I left law to go into ministry, not for the money, but it was tight, and you are a saver. And in a good way, but there's also a lot of fear around not having enough for you, which would correspond with being a 5. Whereas I'm an 8, wing 7. So I'm the entrepreneur. It's like, well, we'll just figure out a way. We'll make more. Like we can do that. And I also tend naturally toward being a spender. So there was that. And then I tend to be more task. and you tend to be more relationship. So Toni would be all about the kids, and I'd be about, well, looks like a bomb went off in the house, so can we please clean it up? And it didn't really look that bad, but to me, that was like a thing. So yeah, it was definitely really difficult, and the arguments never got resolved. You just pick up where you left off. And if Gottman, you talk about this in your book, but the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, what is it? Contempt, defensiveness, criticism, and
stonewalling.
Oh, thank you. Okay. We definitely had all 4. All 4. And he would say, then there's a 98 whatever % chance you're going to divorce. And we didn't, but and we've been able to recover. I don't feel contempt anymore. I mean, maybe there's a moment here or there, but I mean, there was a lot of contempt in the relationship. And we kind of hit our bottom around, we would both peg it around year 15. Years 10 to 15 were really, really difficult. And then, it didn't turn around overnight. It just kept getting better. And now at year 30, almost 31 of our marriage, it's not perfect. We're on this side of heaven, but my goodness, we're having a good time. And sort of all those things we had hoped for. So I would say, to your earlier point, there's probably 4 stages. There was the initial honeymoon and hanging out, getting to know each other, all the excitement, all the emotions are working in the right direction. Then there was the slow slide, the bottom, into the bottom, and then the gradual recovery. And now I'd say the last 5, 6, 7 years has been, we sowed, to use a different metaphor, we sowed a whole bunch of new seed 15 years ago, and the garden is maturing, and it's a lot better.
Hey, Anthony.
Hey, Ian.
I've been crushing it around the clock on my newest book, right?
I know you have.
Well, part of my process is researching topics related to my content.
Okay.
But as you can imagine, there are tons of resources out there. So let me tell you about one of my ultimate life hacks.
Oh, come on. Please tell us.
Okay. It's called Blinkist.
All right.
If you haven't heard of it, Blinkist takes the best need-to-know content from over 4,000 nonfiction bestsellers and condenses it down into just 15 minutes that you can read or listen to. I like Blinkist, and I'll tell you why. Because it quickly gives me the main points of a book, which helps me evaluate which books I want to make time to read in full later, and which ones to prioritize now for the projects I'm working on at the moment. And since Blinkist works on my phone, my tablet, or a web browser, I use it anywhere, whether I'm traveling, making breakfast, working out, man, you name it.
I like it.
I've listened to, and I really highly recommend, Daniel Nettles' book, Personality, and Michelle Obama's book, Becoming. I love both of them. You can even read or listen to the key takeaways from The Road Back to You by yours truly.
Oh, yeah.
I like that with Blinkist, you get unlimited access to read or listen to a massive library of condensed nonfiction books. All the books you want, and all for just one low price. Yeah, so check this out. They just unveiled their new audio content format called Shortcasts. Now, you can use Blinkist's Shortcasts to quickly catch up on podcast episodes you've missed.
This is amazing.
They present and highlight the key learnings of a podcast episode through a specially designed audio format lasting around 15 minutes. And right now, Blinkist has a special offer just for our audience. Go to Blinkist.com/typology to start your free 7-day trial and get 25% off of a Blinkist premium membership. That's Blinkist, spelled Blinkist. Blinkist.com/TYPOLOGY to get 25% off and a 7-day free trial. Blinkist.com/typology.
I'm really glad to, first of all, hear you really have beautifully and concisely described the dynamic in the 8-5 relationship. I mean, you've done a beautiful job of it. And I'm really glad you survived contempt. Gottman talks about this idea. In fact, there's a great quote from Malcolm Gladwell I just pulled up because I know Gottman's work and I know about the whole danger of contempt. He says, if Gottman observes one or both partners in a marriage showing contempt toward the other, he considers it the most important sign that a marriage is in trouble.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I heard that
Yes.
years ago, and I remember hearing it for the first time and going, that's both of us. You had a lot of contempt for me. I had a lot of contempt for you. And, you know, with contempt, I'm not a psychologist, but like, you know, your default shifts to negative, right?
Mhm.
So
Yep.
it would be like, if it was Tony's idea, it was a bad idea.
Mhm.
And I think, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you probably had a similar vibe coming my way that
Mhm.
if I thought about it, there had to be some fatal flaw to it. And almost like the eye roll that was happening on a regular basis, either externally or internally, there was kind of a lot of eye rolling. And yeah, by the grace of God, we got through that, and it's not really there anymore. But that was a deep ditch to dig out of.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. So Tony, you in the book write about the mud, right? In relationships. And maybe we can put it this way, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but every marriage partner brings issues from the past into a marriage, right?
Right.
We sort of like drag luggage along with us, and we usually get married young. We're unaware of the luggage we bring in until, you know, we can no longer ignore it. What, as a 5 now, what luggage did you bring into the marriage? What mud did you bring?
Oh, I had no idea how much mud I was dragging into our marriage. So I do think you'll probably have more accurate thoughts on this than I will, Ian. But in my childhood, I had a parent who was very angry and unfortunately had an alcohol problem. So there were these hidden beliefs that I had that I do believe sprang out of that experience. And they were toxic to our marriage, but I didn't know they were there. And I didn't even get clues that they were there until I was in my early 30s. And it was a long journey of personal growth, spiritual growth to try to bring that mud to the surface, so to speak. And I talk about it being like mud that gets hidden in seams. You know, if you wear clothing into a mud pool, you can wash it off your arms and legs. You wash off everything that's visible, but the mud that's hidden away in the seams, that takes longer to expose and to clean away. So I had this deeply embedded belief that I'm better off alone. And right now I can say nothing is further from the truth. But when that hidden belief was motivating my tendency to withdraw, my tendency to let myself become socially isolated, like I had friends, but the thing is, I could easily skim in those relationships. And when you go superficial, well, it's not really like doing life with people when you stay on the surface. And I'm better off alone was also attached to that tendency that, you know, I had to be independent. I had to be a professional so I could support myself. I had to save money. You know, we had to save money so that we had that security. It was all these things. Yeah, and then there was some other evidences of mud too that came up. Things like I deserve to be invisible. I'm not enough. My voice doesn't matter. And so, you know, obviously a relationship like a marriage, an intimate marriage, just isn't going to flourish with those hidden beliefs that were probably survival mechanisms, you know, that helped me make the best of where I was at in my childhood and move forward, but then really become self-limiting more and more, you know, in a marriage and as you go through life.
No, you've just so beautifully, like, I don't even have to prompt you to describe what a 5 is like, and because you're just spelling it out for me, man. And I just want all 5s to hear, for example, these, and all types to hear this. Number one, all of us have hidden beliefs that are underneath the surface of our lives that, unconsciously, they live outside our awareness, that govern how we live, and we don't even know that these are operative in the background. We just kind of live as with these things autonomously running, and so when I hear you say I'm better off alone, I can just see the 5 child developing that mind, particularly in some ways your type is a response to trauma. And so when you describe that, I'm hearing the alcoholic, unpredictable parent that could feel engulfing and overwhelming. A 5 child begins to escape into the inner sanctum of the mind in order to get away. You're describing the minimalism of the 5, the need to save, the desire, the deep desire for self-sufficiency. Like, I need to take care of myself, almost like no one else is. So I'm going to have to jump in here, make sure the world is a safe place, because fear is always in the interior atmosphere of the 5, as it is for 6s and 7s. I mean, you've done a beautiful job of this. And I just want to encourage everybody listening, listen, you have to either in therapy, through studying the Enneagram, because it does a beautiful job of surfacing these hidden beliefs. It's like the Enneagram can save you time, because it's like it will articulate for you what typically in your type are the hidden beliefs that, and as you mentioned, self-limiting beliefs that may have helped you as a kid. All that stuff helped you as a kid to survive, but in adulthood began to work against you. So, Carey, I want to ask you a question. What mud did you bring into this relationship as an 8?
Oh, quite a bit. I was a very happy single man. I had no conflict. So by getting into a relationship, it's like, oh, another human being who's different than me. Well, this is interesting. No, I brought in quite a bit. Definitely, Toni would retreat into relationship. I would retreat into work. So early on, we moved a lot as a kid. My dad, immigrants, that kind of stuff, new jobs, new opportunities. And I don't fault them for it at all. But I remember, I think we'd moved 5 times in elementary school before I hit the 3rd grade or 4th grade. And so it's always new friends. And I remember getting into the 5th grade and thinking, I know we're going to move again. I'm not making any more friends. And we didn't move after that. But in my mind, the decision was made up. So I've always struggled a little bit relationally, particularly with intimacy, with people getting too close to me, which I think is characteristic of an 8. I had also learned that if I performed well, that things went better. And so I became a performance addict as a kid. You bring home that good report card, you end up succeeding. So there's sort of that drive for success. And, I was raised in a loving home. There were no addictions in the home, raised in the church. But we get these things tripped up. And so in my mind, performance equals love. So it's like, well, how much more can I do? So when things went bad at home and we started to slide into that place, I just threw myself into work, which in that case was ministry in that season, because, I found if I worked more hours, we reached more people, and we became the fastest growing and one of the largest churches in our denomination in the country. And, and then, so it was one of those things where paradoxically for me, there was respect at work, there was success at work, there was measurable progress at work. And then I would come home and things might be a little bit chaotic. There was some stonewalling, there was some conflict, some disagreement. And I would just throw myself into more work. So that's how some of that junk would materialize. So I think, deep down, I have a fear of rejection. I have a fear of intimacy. And so for me, it's been 3 decades of learning that, the right people are safe, and you can be loved and you can be known, and you won't always be rejected or hurt or that kind of thing. And, and I think some of that too goes back to being ginger, being redheaded. I was picked on as a kid. I was one of the taller kids in my class. I'm 6'2", but I was tall fast. So I always got picked for sports teams. I'm not an athlete. So it was always that disappointment of like being picked, and they should know it's only 30 people in your class. Like after a while, you should have a reputation. He's tall, but he's actually not good. But, never feeling like I could really, catch a ball in the outfield or sink a basket or that kind of thing. So I think a lot of that created fear in me. I've never really talked about that, but just being tall, they assume you're good, and I wasn't. And so there was always that fear of people, fear of rejection. That's probably okay. Next therapy session. There we go. But I remember being in the outfield and just being terrified of the ball being hit to me, thinking I wouldn't be able to catch it. Stuff like that.
Hey, Anthony.
Hey, Ian.
You know my kids are grown, but you still have a couple at home, right?
I still have a few at home.
Well, let me tell you about this company who makes engaging products for kids of all ages.
All right.
KiwiCo creates super cool hands-on projects for kids of all ages designed to make learning about STEAM, that's an acronym, by the way, for science, technology, engineering, art, and math, designed to make learning fun.
Ooh, I love this.
Each crate is designed by experts and tested by kids, offering fun opportunities to learn and explore at home. KiwiCo covers a wide range of subjects from science to art to geography, and each line caters to different age groups.
Ooh, I like this.
For instance, my assistant has 2 young boys, 7 and 9, and they received a science crate, which included all the materials and learning resources to build a mechanical model of the sun, the earth, and moon, and they designed their own constellations and made a light-up lantern.
I love this.
And they loved it. With KiwiCo's hands-on art and science projects, kids can engineer a walking robot, design a paint pendulum, conduct bubbling, chemistry experiments, and more.
This sounds like something you and I could have fun with.
Totally. And just for our Typology listeners, get 30% off your first month plus free shipping on any crate line with the code Typology. That's 30% off your first month at KiwiCo. That's KIWICO.com. Promo code Typology, TYPOLOGY.
You have a lot of 3-story in your 8ness. It'd be worth maybe exploring at some point, because you're both aggressive types, 3s and 8s.
Mm-hmm.
And there can be, sometimes a mistype, but the story you just told is in many ways very 3ish. I'm not saying you're not an 8,
Really?
but just, there's a lot of 3 stuff going on there. So let me ask you, I don't want to go down the road because we're talking about the 2 of us, but maybe you and I could someday have a conversation about
maybe I'm a
3s
3.
and
A lot
8s.
of my friends thought I was a 3, and then people around me discovered the book before I did. And like Sarah and Justin, who I've worked with since they were teenagers, are like, "Oh, you're an 8." And you're an 8, because I have that dominant, aggressive. But you're right. There's a lot of perfectionism in me, or not, but that performer aspect.
Yes.
to
And
my
you were
personality
describing
as well.
and you were describing almost in perfect language often what a 3 is like, and the unconscious motivation. But I don't want to run down that road today, because I really want to get. I want to jump into marriage. I want to jump into Tony's book and unpack that a little bit. One of the things, Tony, that you mentioned, and then I think actually it's interesting, Carey, because as you were talking, there were 2 moments that I just happened to note what I would call a sadness pause. There were 2 moments on your face and in your tone when I could tell that a feeling was coming up. I think one was when you were describing, I will never make friends again. That moment when
That is a sad moment. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and you could see it on you, like the energy on your face and your body. And then there was another moment a little bit later on as you were talking. And this goes actually to something that Tony said and that I picked up on too, which is as you face these hidden beliefs, these stories that we tell ourselves and others about who we are and how the world works, that part of the journey to healing is grief. That it's you can't skip grief, because grieving an old muddy message, and so that you can move on, is you got to go through it, not around it. And I picked that up in you, Toni, when you were talking about the message, I'm better off alone.
Mm-hmm. Well, when you mention the grief, Ian, it brings me back to a day that stands out as a marker for me in my healing journey. And it was a complete surprise to me, because Carey and a couple of our friends decided that we were going to go on this conference weekend in Pennsylvania. And at the time I was very busy on the leadership team at one of our local hospitals. And so I said, okay, I'm going, but I put zero thought into it whatsoever. So we show up at this conference, and it's actually an inner healing conference that Dr. Terry Wardle was leading. And he started talking about his own story of how he experienced trauma as a child, and the effects of the trauma and the wounds, and how he went through the healing process. And I literally sat in the front row at this conference in a room of 100 or so people, and I cried through the entire day. And it blindsided me. But it was such a, like what you're saying is so true, that in order for me to start to heal, I had to grieve those losses. And I didn't, it came up out of my body. It was nothing. It wasn't like, oh, I think I'm going to heal the effects of my trauma. Oh no, it rose up out of my body. And there was, I wanted to sink into the floor that day.
Right.
I did not want to be sitting at the front of that class.
I mean, as a 5, yeah, I mean, 5s do not like it when unexpected emotions arise that threaten to overwhelm them. Usually, they'll hear something like that, say, elicits grief or many other feelings, and they want to get home into private and process them alone. And if it comes up though in the moment and they can't stop it, like a 5 gets a little freaked out. You know, me as a 4, bring it. I can cry in the moment, So Anthony, what do you want to say?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, what was that like for you as a 5-4? You describe it as emotions coming up, like from within, as opposed to, kind of coming through the mind. What was that like for you as a 5?
I would say, like, sadness wasn't a foreign emotion for me, but this grief was just so all encompassing. It's just like it took hold over all of me. I had no control over, I could not, many times I can actually hold back tears. Like, I've become pretty good at that, because I tend to, even when I'm joyful, I tend to cry. I don't like to cry all the time. So I've actually, for better or for worse, I have that skill of being able to stop myself from crying. But in this case, it was there was no stopping it. I could have fallen through the floor, but that wasn't an option. Finally, I just had to surrender myself to it and just go, okay, there must be a reason I need to be here today, and I'm surrendering myself to it.
Was there a gift that you got from that now as a 5 looking back on that, it gave you different perspective?
Oh, it was an amazing gift. Like that weekend, that conference was one of the markers. It was one of the times when, love started to become real to me. And these, those hidden lies started to become exposed.
Wow. And so, I think this is a good message for everybody, but particularly for 5s today. I would say to try not to reflexively shy away from feeling, but look for opportunities where feeling can arise spontaneously in settings like that, and let it do its work on you.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, let grief have its way with you. Let joy have its way with you. Don't be afraid in the moment of actually expressing those feelings versus delaying them until some future moment, when it's safer in private to kind of mentally process the feeling, just actually have it, Now, Toni, I want to jump into you. I mean, you're a family law mediator. You're a former divorce attorney. So this gives you a lot of street cred to write a book, right? About, about marriage. I mean, yeah. I mean, so to write a book split, I mean, this is, you got some insight. I just want to know, you talk about 7 core issues that tend to take marriages out. And if you could just briefly kind of like, just tell us what they are, maybe pick 1 or 2 and just, kind of tell us what those are and how people can deal with them.
Well, I think I would start with the whole issue of blame. I think when couples are in a tough place in their marriage, they tend to have this sincere belief that, well, it's all my spouse's fault. Or if they won't say all, it's mainly my spouse's fault. And most people won't go as far as saying like, oh, I'm perfect. I don't have any faults, but they'll give lip service to that, but then it's really mainly my spouse's fault. And I think when we're saying that or believing it, even if we're not saying it, there is a hidden victim narrative going on under the surface that it attaches to it. It can be many different victim stories, but essentially holding on to a victim story is like putting on glasses that are wrong for you. All you can see are blurry images if the prescription's wrong. And that's what happens when with that victim story. I'm not taking personal responsibility for myself. I have a tendency to let myself off the hook. I have a tendency to become more rigid. And most importantly, it prevents me from searching out and owning my own part in what's going on. So like, just for example, when Carey and I were really struggling with conflict, and I would say that I'm the defender of the peace. Like, I'm the victim here of Carey's drivenness, his aggressiveness when we're trying to resolve something. And I'm just trying to keep the peace. But meanwhile, if you get underneath my victim story, no, I'm actually disengaging. There are times when I'm actually stonewalling. And so that whole victim story and blame dynamic is really something I encourage people to pay attention to. You might need prayer, reflection, counseling, advice from someone close to you who can help expose your blind spots. But it's so important to get underneath that hidden victim narrative.
Hey everybody, one of the lessons I've learned over the years is that not everybody benefits from a traditional 50-minute counseling session. And this is why some people can go to couples therapy or personal counseling for a long time and never really get anywhere. This is why I'm such a believer of intensive counseling and my friends at Restoring the Soul in Colorado, created by my longtime friend Michael Cusick to help couples or individuals experience deep change in half-day blocks over 1 or 2 weeks. Now listen, if you can't wait months or years to get to the bottom of an issue or to experience breakthrough, you need to get in touch with my friend Michael and his extraordinary team of counselors at Restoring the Soul. If you're looking to get out of the rut you're in, but can't wait months or years, call Restoring the Soul today for a free consultation with Michael's staff. Call 303-932-9777 and learn how their intensive counseling process can help you. As a special bonus, just for Typology listeners, make sure to visit www.restoringthesoul.com/typology to download their PDF called 5 Ways Unaddressed Trauma May Be Derailing Your Relationships.
All right, so blame, the hidden victim narrative. Just can you just name those 7 sort of threats or things that can pull the rug out from under a marriage. And you don't need to go into detail. Just tell us what they are.
Sure. Okay. So not being aware of the effects of trauma, like the mud you've brought into your marriage, clashing expectations, and not being able to bring them to the forefront and deal with them, emotional disconnection, not staying close, not creating an emotionally safe place in your marriage, dysfunctional conflict. You're fighting, but you're fighting for me instead of fighting for we. Forgiveness is a big thing. It prevents, it keeps you apart. If you're not having conversations about how you're hurting each other, then you're probably building up a wall of grievances that is really holding you apart. And when you get to a bad place in your marriage, trust is also an issue. And so I tell people, don't play it safe. And the idea is someone needs to go first to break this dynamic. And I liken it to leadership qualities. So somebody needs to be tenacious, take the risk, take the first step, and start changing the atmosphere, sowing seeds of love. Be the first one to apologize, lay down the arms and the verbal bombs, and let's set a different tone. So I think that covers it, Ian. I haven't been counting.
Yeah. No, but
Can I
that's
add
great.
one or
I
two
mean,
things? Because we
Sure.
would. These are sub points in the book, but we had lots of discussions about should this be a book or whatever. But one of the things that really surprised me, because I never did family law, divorce law, was I thought one of your great insights was beware the cheerleaders. Like what happens is if things are not going well between Toni and me, I've got my best friend, and my best friend is like, well, you need to ditch her. You could do so much better without her. And you saw that in your office all the time.
Yeah.
With like, you go girl, get rid of him. Like there's all kinds of guys that would treat you so much better. And if you're in a really toxic situation, you may have to leave at some point. But like for a lot of it, the grass is always greener. And then really surprising stuff. So what I've based on what Toni has learned in her family law practice is people will say to me, well, I think we're just going to divorce. It's just too hard. And I'm like, listen, and nobody, this, right? Nobody ever has ministry or money for counseling. Like nobody ever has money for that. It's like, well, if you think counseling's expensive, divorce is way more expensive. And do you know that when it comes to custody, like I didn't even know this, but they'll subpoena your texts to each other. To see what kind of tone there is as evidence to see whether you're a fit parent or not. And it's like, so you think this is messy right now? Like you just get to the other side of splitting and it is way more complicated. So, and obviously all the stories are anonymized, et cetera, and people's identity is protected in the book and even in your private conversation. But when you actually see what's at stake on the other side of splitting, it's like, man, I'm really glad that we were able to work through some of that stuff. And not that it's fatal if you don't, but it's so easy to imagine a better alternative that is actually equally or more complicated.
Yeah. By the way, people who are watching me, you'll notice a lot of times I'm looking down and I'm looking to the side, and I always worry people think I'm looking at texts, but actually I'm scurrying through notes and ideas that are coming up. But when you were saying how friends are cheerleaders, I was thinking about a lyric by a great Nashville songwriter. His name is Travis Meadows. And in this song called Learning How to Live Alone, he has this great line. He says, my old friends don't come around. We all choose sides when the ship goes down. And he's writing about, a
You're
divorce.
right, because at a decade, we had couple friends for the most part. And you're right, even your friendship set changes.
Yeah,
absolutely. All right. Well, I got to close up here, but I just want to ask one last question, Toni, and I bet you people are thinking of it. At what point do you advise a couple to get divorced? When you look at it and you say, you know what, I wish this book would work for you, but it is just not going to, and it'd be best for the two of you to split.
I try to describe that, Ian. It's really hard to describe, especially, I am a pharmacist by training and I'm a lawyer. So I don't have the insight and training that a therapist has. But when I'm trying to draw the distinction between, where do you need to draw the line? I talk about a harmful marriage. And so if there's toxic behavior, if there are destructive things going on, if there's violence, then you need to be in separate residences. Like at least that you need to at least separate. And then you maybe from there you figure out, can healing happen? Is it possible? Are you motivated? But safety is so important. And earlier on, when I said victim story, I wasn't talking about a victim, in the criminal law sense of the matter. I was talking about in terms of taking on the posture of a victim, in a blame and shame game. But when couples are in a place where they're just inflicting pain on each other, if there's, if malice is a part of it, then something needs to happen, because you need to set the family on a path toward healing, not, keep it together and make things worse. So where exactly that line is, I can't say for sure. But if you're listening and you're wondering, like if you are asking yourself, am I in an unhappy marriage where maybe like Carey and I, there's a lot of conflict, there's a lot of hard feelings, maybe there's contempt, but it was mutual. And really, we weren't unsafe for each other. It's just that we were embroiled in this conflict and we were stuck and we didn't know how to get out. But by the grace of God, we did get out. But that's different from a harmful marriage. If you're asking the question, I would encourage you to reach out to someone and don't try to figure it out on your own, but talk to your pastor, talk to your counselor or therapist, talk to a doctor, but talk to someone, because I really want you to figure out where you stand.
Yeah, I mean, I'm so glad you said that, because I've only advised couples a few times. Normally I say, look, this is your decision. I will walk with you through it, but that's usually what I will do. But sometimes in therapy, I have said to people, enough. Like this is not working. We've tried as hard as we can here, and people are suffering. Your children are suffering. Your friends are suffering, and we're faced with two bad options here. But splitting is the better of two bad options. And one, of course, is violence. The second one could be an addiction, a long-lasting addiction without any kind of healing, you know what I mean? Like it's just going too long.
Yes.
It could be repeated unfaithfulness that shows no sign of ending, these sorts of things. It may be a personality disorder that is so embedded and creating so much havoc that you can just tell yourself, this will not change. This is not going to change,
Yes.
And so again, I mean, I think, we want to encourage people to work as hard as we can on marriages, but we all acknowledge that there are times that we're out on the tails of relationships. There are people out on the tails, and those tails, sometimes it's like, this is a drag, but this is going to cause a lot less harm than if I remain, and it's always very hard to figure it out.
So just so people know, none of those four factors you listed were a factor in our relationship. It wasn't a violent relationship. There was no affair. There was no addiction. There was no personality disorder. One thing that was interesting, though, is you said almost every couple that you've met with one way or the other over the years would say there was emotional abuse in the relationship, right?
Yeah.
Which is, I think I disagree with this person, can sometimes the way we use language. So it's so nuanced. That's why I think local counsel is so important. People who know you, care about you, and who are objective enough to tell you the truth.
Right. Well, you all, thank you for two things, at least today. One is for beautifully describing what it's like to be your types. Secondly, what the dynamic in your marriage has been like. So instructive. Toni, I'm so excited about your new book, Before You Split, Find What You Really Want for the Future of Your Marriage, out now on Waterbrook Random House, Penguin Random House, I should say. And, also, for helping us just talk in general for all types about marriage, because obviously what you've learned is not limited to an 8 and a 5, right?
Right.
So I'm so excited for you. People can learn more about you at ToniNieuwhof.com, ToniNieuwhof, the easiest name in the world to spell. ToniNieuwhof.com. And anything else? And obviously at ToniNieuwhof.com on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. I'm so excited for this stage in your journey. Carey, you have been on the show before. I'm going to be on your show very soon. And, obviously people can get to know all about what's happening with you at CareyNieuwhof.com. And that's Carey, Nieuwhof, Nieuwhof.
Very good with that last name, Takes
I'm
about 6
impressed.
months on average for people.
Hey, man, I was an English major. That stuff sticks to me.
There you go. There you go.
I can't add 18 and 37 in less than an hour, but I sure can get spelling down pretty fast. Hey, I love you both so much. Thanks for.
We love you. You made a huge difference to our
yes.
personal lives and also to our leadership.
So-
But just thank you. Thank you so much for what you do. Anthony, Ian, thank you.
Thank you. Now, normally I sign off with the words of the great Oscar Wilde, but this morning, Anthony, I thought to myself, I'm going to end with one of the prayers that I'm learning to say, or a blessing I'm learning to say, even as I walk around the mall and see people and just sort of say it, to the world as a whole, which is, may you have love, may you have joy, may you have peace, may you have healing, and may you have rest. We are so thankful for you, Typology Tribe. We will be back with you next week.